Welcome to the How To Home podcast presented by FilterBuy. I'm your host, Aaron Massey, a DIY home improvement enthusiast and full-time content creator running MrFixItDIY.com. Alongside me is my co-host, Tracy Pendergast, a home and lifestyle blogger operating her website, HeyTracy.com. Each week, we'll cover the real-world ups and downs of owning a home, answer your questions, and if we don't have the answers, we'll talk to some experts to help you get the most out of your remodel, repair, and home improvement projects. So without further ado, let's start the show. Welcome back to another episode of the How To Home podcast. My name is Aaron Massey. Joining me as always is Tracy Pendergast. And we have a special guest today, Thyda Sim, who is a realtor for Keller Williams. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So why don't you give us a little bit of a background about your experience?
I have been a realtor with Keller Williams for a while now. My husband is also a licensed realtor, and we work as a husband-wife team in Southern California.
Oh, that's interesting.
Sorry, my head just exploded. And this works well?
Sometimes. I mean, we definitely bump our heads more often than we should, but it works.
I'm just playing with you. Is there any competition?
A little bit.
Little healthy competition.
I'm the CEO of our company, by the way. So he's my little secretary.
Nice. Have you ever represented opposite sides of the same transaction?
No, we have not. We definitely work as a team.
That would be interesting. I'm the buyer's agent. I'm the seller's agent. And it's
That would be cool.
Husband versus wife.
Yeah, we
Sounds like an
almost
HGTV show.
Yeah, we almost did. That was pretty interesting, but no, we work together for the most part.
Well, that's awesome. So today we are talking about kind of renting versus buying. You know, I think one of the most traditionally attractive financial investments has been buying a home. But given the rising interest rates, the student loan debt, I think a lot of maybe the younger generation may not feel like buying is a reasonable transaction that they can make at this point in their life. And so we're going to kind of explore whether home buying or home renting is maybe right for different types of people. And we're going to dive into that in just a second. But before we do that, you did some research on some facts.
Oh, yes.
About home ownership.
I
Why don't
am
you share
armed
some
and
of
ready.
those? Yeah.
Okay. So according to Realtor.com, the average US homeowner is 55 years old.
Not a young demo for homeowners.
I would have never guessed that, to be honest. I would have guessed 30s. According to Zillow, in 1980, the median price of a home in the U.S. was $47,200 and has risen to over $200,000 in 2018, while the median rental price for a home in the U.S. is about $1,650 a month. Definitely
A significant rise in home prices in the last 30, 40 years.
According to Zillow, the average home value in the U.S. has risen over 7% in the past year. So that is actually some good news for a seller. And according to Experian, the average mortgage debt in the U.S. for 2016 was nearly $200,000.
Obviously, the debt aspect of things is a huge deal for a younger demographic. I know it was a significant hurdle for me to overcome trying to figure out if we could even buy something here in the area. And my wife and I bought our first home 4 years ago. So there's a lot of things that go into it. And I think you can certainly share a really good perspective and a lot of valuable information. So before we dive into that real quick, I just want to say a quick thank you to our founding sponsor, FilterBuy. FilterBuy is an HVAC filter provider, and they ship directly to consumers. So you just sign up on their website, input your filter sizes, and they ship them directly to your door. You don't need to set reminders on how often you want to change your filters. They send them to you on the schedule that you want, and they're there when you need them. What I really want to dive into first is many young people, I think, consider buying a home these days as kind of an unattainable goal. Very much so, I think, in the LA area, certainly because of the price of the homes. We're in a generation where they have, record historic student loan debt, all that type of stuff. So is buying a home attainable for a younger demo?
Yes, I've seen many young folks and single income families purchase their first homes. It happens all the time. It really just depends on the person's situation, their financial situation, their goals, and their lifestyle. I think if you want to make it work, you will make it work. A lot of younger people nowadays, look at the rent versus buy comparisons, and they they make it happen. They change their lifestyles, they set their goals, and they just keep at it. And soon enough, they're able to buy their first homes.
Traditionally, the American dream has always been, buy a home, have your family, in the home. Is that still, do you think that's still the American dream, or has it evolved into people want a little more flexibility and travel and that type of stuff?
I think it is still the American dream. If anything, I feel like the younger generation now are so financially savvy that they want to invest in real estate because they want that financial freedom later on.
So what do you think are the benefits of buying versus renting?
There are actually many benefits. One, for example, if you're renting, you're paying someone else's mortgage. Whereas if you buy your own home, you're paying your own mortgage, and that mortgage, you'll eventually be paying yourself. Think of it as like a savings plan or a retirement fund. If you're renting for, let's say, 5 years, you're going to be paying into someone else's savings account for those 5 years when you can really be paying yourself. Another thing is that when you're renting, your landlord can actually kick you out at pretty much any time, or give you 30 days notice, or increase your rent by $500 a month, without you having a say in it. And when you own your home, your mortgage is going to be pretty much the same month to month until the end of your term. So those are some of the bigger advantages. And also the flexibility. If you are renting, you can't really change it and make it the way you want it to be without, their permission, without the landlord's permission. Whereas when you own your home, you are the landlord, so you can make those decisions yourself. And, just having, that pride of ownership and just making, having your own home, those are definitely some of the bigger benefits I've seen.
For sure. We lived in New York in an apartment for almost 13 years. And one of the hardest parts is you want to beautify that home. You want to make it feel like your own, but you know that all the money you're putting into the garden or the kitchen or cabinets, it's staying there.
Yes.
It's not coming with you. So when you weigh those pros and cons, it's...
Yeah, and there are certainly advantages to renting as well. Certainly in my home, it's an older home. I bought it. It requires a lot of maintenance, a lot of upkeep,
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of things, extra costs that go into just owning a home on a yearly basis that maybe you don't consider, which I think we'll dive into in a little bit. But there are some additional costs. So it depends on your lifestyle, right? Do you want a little bit more flexibility? Mm-hmm. Do you want, you got to have extra savings around in case your water heater breaks or anything like that. And, when you're renting,
true.
that's a landlord's deal.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about that.
Yeah,
you can cut out your monthly budget on home per month, and you know exactly what it's going to be. I wish that was the case with home ownership, but it is not.
Yeah, and if the plumbing leaks, guess who has to deal with it? You. Mm-hmm. And whereas if you're renting, you just call the landlord and they'll get it fixed. So yeah, there are the additional costs of owning your home. Like I said, you're the landlord, so you're going to have to do all the repairs and all the maintenance, year round. Whereas with a landlord, they would be able to take care of that type of stuff for you.
If you're looking at property owning as an investment, there's the old kind of adage that renting is just throwing your money away. Do you really see that as true? Obviously, I think, and certainly in the last few years, based on the facts that we mentioned, like home values are up. So a 7% return, year over year on an investment is a pretty decent return.
Oh, yeah.
So as an investment property, yeah, owning a home makes sense. But is renting really throwing money away?
Here's the thing. You're going to be paying for a place to live regardless if you're renting or buying a home. And so I wouldn't say that you're throwing your money away, but I will say that you are... you're making a deposit into someone else's savings rather than your own. And I feel like if you can, and if it's something that you would like to do in the future to own your home, then I say just do it.
So say I want to buy my first home. How much can I expect I need to save for a down payment?
Well, I think a lot of people have the misconception that you need 20% for a down payment, but that's actually not true. There are so many different programs now that make it possible for you to own a home with as little as 3.5% down payment or 5%. Lenders have so many different programs, even for veterans and teachers and people in the medical field. There are just so many different programs out there that can help you make it work.
So if you're using one of those programs to put down a lower down payment, is that going to make me less attractive to someone who's selling the house?
Yes and no. There are some some sellers who are looking for mainly cash offers, or, cash is always king. If you have a cash offer, that's obviously more attractive, because with the cash purchase, you don't have to wait for inspections or appraisals, and they don't have to do as many repairs as, if you were to get, like, let's say an FHA loan, the house would need to be up to code for FHA standards. I think in order to make your offer just as attractive is to make it a clean offer. Don't ask for a lot of things, and you can shorten your contingency periods and also the escrow period as well. I mean, that would be a few things that I feel like are helpful. And then if you really want to be in the running, maybe speak with your agent about it and just kind of look at the comps and see if it's a smart choice to offer a little bit higher than asking price. And there are times when it's a seller's market where buyers would offer to cover some of their closing costs. But like I said, you should really look at all aspects of that. Speak with your agent and see if they can run the comps for you and see what makes the most sense.
If somebody wants to think about, or maybe they are a teacher or they've been in the military, who do they speak to find what would be the best option for them?
There's so many lenders out there that are willing to sit down with you and go over the different programs with you. And if you guys don't have a lender to work with, I can definitely recommend some. But, speak to your agent. They usually have recommendations for you or referrals to different lenders for you. And they would be able to break down the different programs that are available and work with you and let you know what you need to do, what the next steps are in order to take advantage of those programs.
How do you get most of your business as like a buyer's agent? Is it referrals, or do people find you online? Where does most of your business come from?
Well, I think with technology these days, a lot of people turn to like social media to find some of their agents. Like, you can look on Instagram and find so many different agents out there, or Facebook. Everybody has like a business page. Every realtor does, I feel like. I work mainly by referrals. My friends and family refer, business to me. I've done open houses where I meet complete strangers, and then they hold on to my card for like 6 months, and they'll call me when they're actually ready. And then, I get them a beautiful home, and we become great friends. So, I mean, you can really find realtors anywhere. Redfin, Zillow have recommended agents as well. But I think you should really just talk to the people see who they've used, and reading reviews on them, and call and interview a few of them and see which one works best with you and your personality.
It's funny. I feel like real estate agents really become a part of your life, because they guide you through some of the biggest like milestones in your life. So our real estate agent, when we moved from New York to California, he helped us find our house, and then we became friends. We stayed in touch with him the couple years in our house. Then he sold our last house and got us our new house, and it's just like, I don't know, real estate agents, they become a part of your life.
Yeah, you kind of become family. Like my clients, I found them homes, thankfully, close to me. And now, like, we're having play dates, and, we celebrate holidays and stuff together. So I think you just got to find a really good agent that you, really connect with and can build that strong relationship with, long term, because later on, when you do want to sell your house or want to buy investment properties, you know that you have someone that you can trust who did a good job for you before.
I have a random question. Like, what's the longest that you've ever had, like, a client where you were trying to buy a home? Like, have you ever had, like, trying to get somebody into a home that's lasted more than like a year? Or
it's funny you asked that question, because it took my husband and I about almost 2 years to find our house. And I feel so bad for our agent, because she had to take us everywhere and work with us like for almost those 2 years. But we finally found our home. And for me personally, I've had a client who I've worked with for about a year and a half, almost 2 years as well, from the starting point when we sat down to have our buyer's consultation and go over the steps of purchasing your home. And, there are some things that they needed to do in order to get their foot in the door of a home. And so from that point until closing of their house, it was almost 2 years.
That's a lot of investment for you. And
yeah.
as a realtor, like you don't get paid until that they make that transaction happen. So that's a lot of work, you know?
Yes. So we don't work for free. So be loyal to your agents, guys.
Well, we were with our real estate agent for over a year as well. We were coming back and forth from New York, and poor guy, we didn't know like really what area we wanted to live in. So one week we would like do LA, and then I don't think we really want to be in LA. Then, you know, we went to different communities until we found a community we liked and settled in. But we thought the same thing. We're like, bless his heart. Like, he's been with us a really long time, and that we're appreciative, but we're also like, we will never work with anyone else. We're very loyal. Thank you.
Yes.
Loyal.
I think agents really appreciate the fact that you're loyal to them because, like you said, we do spend a lot of time like doing research, driving you around, or, you know, just negotiating on your behalf. And I think a lot of people have the misconception that real estate agents just sit there and, you know, collect the checks, but that's not true. Like there's a lot of behind the scene works, but I know that's a totally completely different topic.
Well, just kind of talking about that relationship, when people come to you and voice their fears about buying a home, what are some things you tell them to reassure them that it's a good decision?
Well, usually whenever we have a sit-down conversation with them at a buyer's consultation, we'll go through the pros and cons of purchasing your home. Like we discussed, there's maintenance costs, there's property tax that you're going to have to consider. There's, in addition to the down payment, you also have the closing costs that you have to consider as well, which is typically anywhere from 2 to 5%. A lot of people don't realize that that's an additional cost that you'll have to have upfront when buying a home. But we also just sit down and talk to them about, you know, what's to come, what to expect. And, you know, sometimes maybe buying a home isn't the right decision for everyone. And we're just really upfront and honest. And that's how we gain our clients' trust. And then also, I work with a team of professionals. Like, you know, if it's a financial question or a lending question, I'm going to refer you to a lender. And if it's a tax question, I'm going to refer you to an accountant because I'm not going to say that I know it all. But I think my clients like the fact that we have a whole team of professionals working for them and hold their hand every step of the way.
My wife and I came from a very different housing market. Than LA. You know, where I came from in upstate New York, homes were very cheap. The property taxes are a little, you know, cost prohibitive up there. But LA, the sticker price of a home is like astronomical compared to it. So for me, it was like, I can't wrap my head around this kind of level of debt to buy a home, you know, but it was great to work with our agent who kind of, you know, figured it out and was like, look, it's really not that different than what you're paying in rent if you kind of look at it this way. And so it's super beneficial to have, you know, a buyer's agent. And we ended up working kind of a unique deal, talking back to some of the things you were talking about before about does it make you a less attractive buyer? Well, it also depends on the seller because this particular seller that we bought our home from, we ended up doing a seller financed thing, which is a completely different type of thing, but I won't dive into that too much. But they wanted it to go to somebody who was going to appreciate it, who wanted to have a family there, who wanted to have, they didn't want to just sell it to a flipper who was going to come in and tear it down and flip it, you know, and they wanted it to go and somebody who was going to kind of put some TLC into it and improve it and stuff. And so there is that aspect as well. So you never know, you know, what you're going to encounter as a buyer. You may encounter a seller that just likes you. And if you're, you know, have a relationship with the seller, then it might work out.
Yeah. And a tip that I do have for buyers is that, for example, one of my past clients who purchased their home, their offer was not as attractive as another offer that was submitted because their house was contingent to selling their house, you know, and so the seller just wanted to move out there right away. However, they wrote a letter to the sellers and included like a picture of them and just told them like everything that they liked about the house. And they just poured their heart into that letter. And the couple, they decided to go with our offer instead of the higher offer without any contingencies because they knew that my buyers were going to take care of the house. And, you know, they've lived at the house for over 40 years. So they want someone who's going to take care of that, you know, as after they move along.
We did the same thing. We wrote a letter to our first house and they wrote us back, and it was really kind. And then the second time we were buying from an investor, and I just imagined him going like this with our letter.
Shredder. Yeah, straight to the shredder.
Oh, why not? We'll just include this anyway. But I mean, at the end of the day, he just wanted to sell the house.
Mm-hmm.
What are some things that a potential buyer should consider when evaluating on whether or not to buy a home? If it's your first time home, what things do you need to consider?
One of the first things that you want to consider when you want to buy a house is how long are you going to stay there for? I mean, if you're going to stay there for less than 2 years, I wouldn't suggest buying that home just because you're going to have your money tied down into that house, as a down payment. You're going to pay for all these closing costs. Only to move in, a couple of years. That personally, I don't think that really makes sense. But if you're going to stay there long term, let's say like 4 or 5 years or even longer, then I think it is definitely buying is definitely something that you should consider. Also, I mean, what is your budget? Like, take a really deep look into your budget and see what you can really afford on a month-to-month basis. Because like we mentioned earlier, there are so many different expenses that comes with buying a home as well. You're going to have your maintenance costs and property tax and things like that. Those are two important factors. And also your lifestyle. Are you ready to settle down, or are you still trying to travel or explore and see where you really want to settle down? Because there's this seller that I've worked with before that bought a house and then wanted to sell, within eight months, and actually sold it for less than what he bought it for because of the market.
Yikes.
So, I mean, don't dive into it like just because you feel like it's the right thing to do. It really just depends on your situation.
If you could just go step by step, say I'm coming to you and I want to buy a home, what would the process be?
So first of all, you would want to speak to a lender and have them look at your finances, have them run your credit score, look at your debt to income ratio, see what you can afford, and then they will give you a pre-approval letter. And with a pre-approval letter, you can pretty much go house shopping. And then once you and your agent find the right house, you're going to put in an offer. And if your offer does get accepted, that's when you open escrow, and that's a whole another story to get into. But usually, it's a pretty straightforward process where you just pretty much complete all your paperwork and stuff on time, and but you always have folks on your team just walking you every step of the way, like you said. And then after escrow closes, you sign the loan paperwork, and then they record title, and the house is yours.
So let's go back to that pre-approval number. Mm-hmm. What does that number include? That's the price of a house that you can get, but it doesn't include what?
So that's the price of the house that you can get. It doesn't include property taxes and things like that and other maintenance costs that might come with the house later on. But with that pre-approval letter, the underwriter is going to take a look at everything. They're going to look at what debts you have and see how much you can actually afford on a month-to-month basis.
To that point, I think when my wife and I first went through the pre-approval process, we actually pre-approved for quite a large amount of money that I wasn't comfortable making the payments on. So I actually asked the lender to bring it down because I looked at the what the kind of the monthly mortgage payment was going to be. And I was like, yeah, I may be approved for that, but there's no way I'm going to be able to make those payments. So I actually was like, you can go ahead and bring that down because I'm not going to, I'm not going to take that on because there's just, so make sure you're not like getting pre-approved for a substantial amount of money and being like, I can buy a house worth this amount. And then be like, oh, wait, I can't make these payments. I just not ready for that.
I have to suggest a documentary while we're all talking about this. It's on Netflix and it's called Minimalist. And they actually go into this, that one of the big issues right now is that you get approved for a certain amount and you start looking for anything that is that amount. But really, like Aaron said, break it down to like the extra payments, the monthly payment, and give yourself a little bit of wiggle room. You don't have to spend the amount that you're pre-approved.
I completely agree. And it's funny, Aaron, that you mentioned you being approved for a certain amount and then you not being comfortable with the monthly payments for that amount. And so you asked your lender to bring it down. That's actually really smart. And what I suggest to my clients as well when they're in the same situation, like let's say I have a client that was approved for $800,000, but looking at the monthly payments, they're like, yeah, no way are we going to want to pay that much. So a little little insider tip or secret. I'm not sure if I should be sharing this, but when you are pre-approved for more than you would like to pay, don't let your lender write that amount on your pre-approval letter, because a lot of times when you do submit your offers, you're going to include that pre-qualification letter. And when a seller's agents see that you're qualified for more, they might want to
counter your offer a little stiffer.
And keep it at that price, because they're like, oh, you can afford this. And if you really love the house, we're going to keep it at this price. So I like to suggest to my clients to get an pre-approval letter to where the house price is at, or wherever you're comfortable
what they feel comfortable with.
And
That's
one
really
thing,
important.
One thing that I wish I had done a little, we were talking about additional costs of ownership before. My house is old, from the 30s, and it's very inefficient. And I did ask the seller previously to include like a year's worth of HVAC bills, heating and air conditioning stuff. And I got them from the seller, and I looked at them and they seemed very affordable. Well, what I didn't realize was how they used it. They were much more comfortable letting the house get a lot hotter and not as comfortable as what I did. So like when I went in there early on, and we were in there for the first couple months, we bought in the July, we closed. And we had July, August, September. So when those first HVAC bills came in, they were like, whoa, this is not what I thought it was going to be, because of how we were kind of using it, and it was like, oh, shoot. That's an additional cost. There's nothing you can do. No. Yeah. And well, fortunately, we didn't have the baby at that time, but this was initially when, the house was like wide open. I had to add doors and windows and stuff because everything that was going on inside was going on outside. It literally was like, there was almost like we didn't even have walls in some spots. So now it's much better, but it was like, and it's still to this day, it's a huge additional cost.
So historically, is there a best time of year to buy a house?
So I feel like if you want less competition, I would probably start shopping in the fall or winter, because nobody really wants to go out home shopping during the holidays. So, but some sellers still need to sell their house within the month or so. So I would suggest looking to go house shopping in the fall or winter, because most people tend to go shopping during spring or summer because they want to get into their homes and get settled in so their kids can start school at their new school, by September or late August now. But I would definitely recommend looking during the holidays, even though some sellers might not sell. There might not be as much inventory on the market during the holiday season, but I feel like you'll have less competition. You probably wouldn't get beat out by, so many investors or other higher offers. And also during, November and December and even January, the houses sit on the market a little bit longer, so they're more likely to lower their prices.
I personally have heard a lot of horror stories in regards to buyers falling in love with homes, and then only to have a flipper or somebody come in, an all cash buyer come in and just yank the rug out from underneath them. But is there a way to compete with that? Or is it just like it depends on the seller?
There's no guaranteed way. And yes, it does kind of depend on the seller and their goals. Let's say if you have someone who got a job out of town and they need to leave in a month, you have an offer and it's contingent on you selling your property, or you are getting, like, let's say an FHA loan, which is a 45-day close, you're going to probably lose out to that cash offer that they have on the table, because they can close pretty quickly. My suggestion is, if you want to be in the running, is to submit a clean offer where you're not asking for a lot of repairs. If you really want the house and if it makes sense, maybe offer a little bit more than the asking price. Cash offers, sometimes they tend to be a little bit under the asking price because they feel like, since it's a cash offer, they have an advantage, and so they feel like they can lower their offer a little bit more. So if you want to be in the running, then just maybe offer a little bit more than the asking price, if that makes sense. And then also shorten the contingency periods. That can be pretty attractive as well, because that means you can possibly close faster too. But like you said, it really does depend on the sellers and their goals and what they're looking for. And like we discussed, if there's a seller that didn't really care about the price, but really wanted someone to take care of their home. But it really just depends. But you can try those things, like shortening the contingency period, the escrow period, offering a little bit more, and just not asking for a lot.
I know a lot of people out there kind of, may have made some mistakes in their youth and racked up credit card debt and had some problems. Is there anything out there for those types of people? Like, how can those types of people try and get into a home?
I think that a lot of people avoid buying a home or even, following the steps because they're so afraid of their credit scores disqualifying them from buying a house. My suggestion is just to sit down and talk to a lender. They can run the scenarios for you and, run your credit and see, what makes the most sense. You can possibly buy a house. If you have the savings for it, for a bigger down payment, you can qualify to buy a house, but just at a higher interest rate. That might not be the best idea, but if that's really what you want, then it can probably be done. My suggestion is to take care of your credit as soon as you can because we've all made those mistakes. I've made those mistakes myself too, and just the sooner you take care of it, the better. So that way you can set yourself up towards buying your home.
So my husband and I, we bought our house. I was straight out of college. My husband was a bit older. And I had bad credit. Like it was one of those things where you're sitting at the table and these numbers come up and it's kind of the first conversation you've had about these things in front of your husband usually. And it's like, oh my gosh. And it wasn't bills that were still open. They were all closed, paid for. So what we did is there was a service where they will actually write a letter to every single credit company asking for it please to be taken off of your record. And if they don't respond in, I'm gonna have to fact check this, but it's like 15 to 20 days, it automatically comes off. And with that service, I was able to get almost everything taken off my credit because it was just old college stuff where I would open a card and pay it off and be like, oh, I'm not going to use it again. I'm just going to close it. So I closed them all. So there are services out there that can help you get that in order.
And kind of how we approached that, I had significantly better credit than my wife at the time when we were kind of, like I mentioned, we did a seller finance thing, but when we refied, we ended up refining and paying off the seller finance thing later on. But I had significantly better credit. And the way that we approached it was like, she's on the title and the deed of the house and everything. And so we share the ownership of the house, but in the eyes of the lender, I own the loan. So it depends on the relationship. Some people may not be comfortable with that. Some people may not, because in the eyes of the loan, something happens, but she's my wife and I don't have any plans to change that. So I was totally comfortable with it, but there's ways around it. Maybe your partner might have better credit and explore the options of what something like that might look like. It could be a valuable option for somebody.
Yeah, I'd say just don't be embarrassed to ask.
Yeah, and that's actually what we did as well. When I moved here from Washington and we bought our house, and it was pretty much my husband's loan, his mortgage, and I just started my job like 3 months prior. And so, I didn't really qualify for a loan because I wasn't working for about 2 years after I moved down here, with personal and health issues, with my parents back at home. But so that's exactly what we did. And like I said, that's why I think it's best to sit down and talk to a lender because they know the ways around it and how to make it work for you and your situation. Let it be, if you have a lower credit score or you have bad credit or you don't have the down payment, they would be the best people to sit down and talk to first.
The lenders are going to look basically kind of at like your last year's worth of earnings. So if you're considering buying a home, just know that like if you've been unemployed for the last 6 months, but you've only just started working again, in the last 3-4 months, maybe wait, maybe wait till next year to pull the trigger if you can, because they're going to look back at all that, time where, maybe you had plenty of savings and whatever, but in the eyes of them, you weren't earning. So it may be a detraction for the type of interest rate you're going to get and all that stuff. So know in advance, if you're considering buying, I think that one of the best case scenarios would be, make sure you have a year's worth of kind of back earnings that you can reflect so that you get in the best rates and all that possible.
Right. And on the flip side of that, when we were going to get our second home, we had our best financial year that we had ever had as a couple. So, and it was shown when we were approved for a certain amount. So also looking at each other and talking and saying, this might not happen again next year. So let's not base what we buy on like this year. We're both freelance. So again, taking a good look at things.
It depends, and it's all about just bringing that up to the lender that you're speaking with, and making sure that everything is on the table.
So you've given us a lot of really good tips, but if you had to give us your top 5 tips for buying a home, what would they be?
Definitely, like I've been saying this whole time, take a deep look at your finances and just really understand what you can afford. And, and if it's not the right time for you to buy, don't buy, because you don't want to be house poor and just, eat top ramen for, the next 30 years.
Unless you really like top ramen.
Unless you like it, yeah.
I know somebody that really likes top ramen.
Yeah, so, just really take a look at that. And then also, how long are you going to be there? I think that's really important too, because like I said, one of the sellers that I've worked with before, they sold their house for less than what they bought it for. And, that didn't really make any sense. But the reason why he bought the house at the time is because he felt like it was the right thing to do. And like I said, it's not the right decision for everyone in their situation. So pick a really good agent. Someone that you can really trust and you're comfortable working with, because they're the ones who are going to know about your financial situation. They're the ones who are pretty much looking for a house for you, and where you're going to be spending, pretty much your life savings on. And I think that's really important, just to pick the right agent to work with, because they can direct you to, the right lenders that you can probably build a relationship with down the road as well. And also location. I think that's, everyone always says that, you can change your home, but you can't change the location. Just really do your research and just know your areas. And if you're moving to a different place, my clients are actually out. So their house is on the market, is actually closing escrow in about 2 weeks. And they flew out to Texas to kind of check out the different cities where they're going to look to move to. And instead of buying right away, they decided that they're going to be renting for the first 6 to 12 months, see whatever lease they can get, so they can really explore and understand the areas that they really want to settle down at. Because you don't want to move into a completely different city and have like a $500,000 mortgage,
only to find out you hate your neighbors.
Yes, exactly.
The area is not what you thought it was on the brochure.
Yeah, and I think what took us so long to get a house too is because I got a little creepy. And at nighttime, after, around 8 or 9, I would drive to the different houses and sit in front of the house and just kind of check out the activity. Are there a lot of people still out on the streets and walking around and stuff? And I don't really feel comfortable. I was pregnant at the time when I was, looking for a house. So it was really important for me to find a house that I felt comfortable at and for my kids to grow up at. So location is key. Do your research. Go there at nighttime to see what it's like and see if it's something that you're really comfortable living at. Yeah.
So you've shared a ton of valuable information with us. And I thought we would jump into, we have a couple voicemail questions that some listeners have called in and asked. Okay. So I thought maybe you could answer some of those questions right now, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And if you guys do have questions for us at anytime, you can reach our voicemail box at 978-709-1040.
You're getting really confident with that phone number. It's really rolling off the tongue.
Somebody's going to ask me for my phone number one day, and I'm going to give them that number because I've said it so many times.
I'm interested in financing and purchasing my first home. I was wondering about how to go about that and what are the first steps, and if I get my credit checked, then what I would need to pass that and be eligible to get my first home.
So it sounds like he has no experience as a buyer at all. And he's worried about getting his credit checked and all that, and just needs some initial guidance for how to go about it. I think we touched on it a little bit, but maybe in a short, concise way, maybe you can share some recommendations for him.
Okay, first things first, find an agent that would be able to sit down and talk to you about all of the steps of buying your first home. Like I said before, find someone that you can trust, and really they would be able to go over the steps with you. And yes, the first step to buying your home is to get your credit checked and to get that pre-approval, because there's no point in really going house hunting for a house that's $800,000 when you're really qualified for $400,000. You're going to be wasting your time, and your agent's time. And a lot of times agents aren't really going to take you house shopping unless they see a pre-approval letter.
I know that when you get your credit checked, you take a credit hit on it. You don't want to be running your credit all the time. How long is that good for? Do you know?
That's usually good for about 12 months. And, when you're shopping around for an agent, you should also shop around for a lender as well, because they can give you like different rates. And I think a lot of first-time buyers are usually concerned about getting multiple hits, but you'll only get one hit within those 12 months because it'll be shown as like a mortgage credit check.
So we were talking about renting too. So if you're going around and submitting letters to different landlords and wanting to get approved to rent, if each individual landlord
runs your credit,
does that cause problems?
From my understanding is that it should just be shown as like one type of credit check. It's not like you're going to like a Macy's and Nordstrom, and trying to
defaulting on a bunch of debt.
Yeah, and trying to like apply for different, retail credit cards. It should only be shown as like a mortgage credit check. I'm not sure about the rental credit check, but I think it pretty much falls into the same thing, same category.
Hi, Aaron. This is Jennifer. Colin, I have a question. This house, we ended up buying it, but before us, the previous person had put in an offer. They were supposed to close, but they ended up backing out. And I was just curious, once you have your contract in place that you're going to buy, what happens if you back out? Like, do you get your money back?
When you submit an offer, you also make a deposit. And with that deposit, it's really up to you. Typically, it's at least 1%. It just kind of shows the seller how much you want that house. If it's within the contingency period, if you haven't removed your inspection contingency or your appraisal contingency or your loan contingency, and the reason why you're backing out is one of those reasons, then you're still protected and you'll get your deposit back. However, if those contingencies are removed and you still want to back out and your reasoning for backing out is not because of the inspection, the appraisal, or the loan, then you might lose that deposit.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess you really want to evaluate
if you're serious
about buying or not, like, and make sure you build those contingencies in the event that something else. I think that, are they default added, like those types of contingencies that you're talking about, inspections and all that, unless you waive them?
Yeah, you can waive them. I mean, like, when we were discussing how to beat out cash offers, like that's one way to beat some cash offers too, is if you were to waive some of these contingencies. But as an agent, usually a buyer's agent, I wouldn't suggest it because you want to know what's wrong with the house before you get into it, and you want to know what it's valued at. So I wouldn't advise removing inspection and appraisal contingencies unless you're planning to tear the house down yourself anyways. I wouldn't remove those contingencies. And the contingency periods, they're all negotiable. Like usually is like 14 days is the inspection contingency, but you can shorten it to like 10 days or even like 7 days if you're really serious and you want to get into the house sooner.
So if people want to get some more information from you about buying a home, or maybe want to ask you if you're open to representing them as their agent, how can they get in touch with you and how can they find you?
Oh, you can email me at thydasim@gmail.com or thydasim@kw.com, or you can see our website, simteamrealty.com.
I know I wish personally I would have listened to something like this before we bought our first home, because it was overwhelming and a long process that I really went back and forth 100 times and gave myself crazy anxiety just trying to figure out if it was, realistic for us or not. And I'm glad that we did it. Certainly now that I have a home for my son and endless content for my home improvement videos and all that type of stuff. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You had fun, right?
Yeah, right. No pressure. Again, if you want to call in, leave us some voicemails or suggestions, please do so. 978-709-1040. Or hit us up on social media, or hit me up on an email, aaron@howtohome.com. We want to thank our sponsor, FilterBuy, for making this episode and this series possible. And be sure to rate us on your various podcast listening apps. Hit the like button if you're watching the video.
Yes, and if you are listening to us on your phone, take a screenshot and tag us in those Instagram videos. We love to see who's listening and watching.
That's right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
The How To Home podcast is brought to you by FilterBuy.com, your one-stop direct-to-consumer replacement air filter brand, and is produced in collaboration by Amassed Media Group, LLC, and Intelligent Arts and Artists. The show is executive produced by George Ruiz and Aaron Massey.